Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Leviticus. Today we are looking at Leviticus chapters 13 and 14. You recall that we are in the section dealing with cleanness and uncleanness, purity and impurity in a ritual sense. Those things that make a person ritually unclean, unable to go into the tabernacle and worship. And chapters 13 and 14, the topic under discussion is leprosy. Leprosy. Let's read a few verses to get sort of the tone. We're in chapter 13, the first few verses. Now the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when anyone has a swelling or a rash or a shiny spot on their skin that may be leprosy, they must be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons who is a priest. The priest is to examine the sore on the skin. And if the hair in the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be more than skin deep, it is leprosy. When the priest examines that person, he shall pronounce them ceremonially unclean. So part of the laws of purity or cleanliness have to do with being a leper. And if someone is thought to have leprosy, they are to present themselves to the priest. He is to examine them. In chapters 13 and 14, there are some detailed ways there to make the examination. And if it is determined the person has leprosy, he is pronounced unclean. That is, unable to go into the sanctuary, unable to go into the tabernacle, unable to participate in the worship life of Israel. And also because he is unclean, if anyone comes into contact with him, they also will be unclean. So in verse 45 of chapter 13, we see this. Anyone with such a leprosy or a skin disease must wear torn clothing. They must let their hair be unkempt. They must cover the lower part of their face. They must cry out, unclean, unclean. Now, as long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp. So we know what this condition is ceremonially unable to go into the worship experience of the Israelite life. And also they must live almost as if they're in perpetual mourning. Actually, some of the description here of tearing your clothing, your hair being unkempt, these are actually signs of grieving or of mourning. It's almost as if they're mourning the fact that they ceremonially are dead. Because they can't go to worship. They can't be a part of the life of Israel. They are unclean. Now, as you read through the chapters, if they become clean, that is, if they recover from the disease, there is a way by which they can present to the priest that they no longer have the disease. And if he pronounces them clean, there are some offerings to be made that will purify them and will readmit them to the life of Israel, the life of the community of faith, and to the worship experience. Lots of details are given as to how that can be done. Now, there's a couple things we need to say about this. First, as we saw in chapter 12 yesterday, when a mother, after she gave birth, would be unclean for a certain amount of time, we saw it was not a matter of sin. It was just a matter of, because of that condition, after birth experience, there was a time when she could not go into the worship place. It had nothing to do with sin. Likewise with this disease. When you have this disease, it is not a matter of sin. It's not that anyone has sinned. Just to catch a disease is not a sin. We know that. So it's not a matter of sin. But it's a matter that this disease at this time makes you unable to worship. It makes you ritually unclean. Of course, this is much more serious because anyone who touches you will become unclean, so you're sort of distanced from the life of Israel. But please do not understand this as being a condition of sin. It's not. It's a physical condition, a health condition that makes you unable to worship. And so provisions are made for your life, but also for readmission to the community once the disease is healed or cured, which often it was. Now, one more thing we should say about this, these are restrictions on leprosy or the instructions about leprosy, but in the Old Testament, the word leprosy is different than how the word leprosy is used today. The word leprosy in Bible times referred to all kinds of skin diseases. Now today, leprosy refers to a specific medical condition known as Hansen's disease. But in the Bible, that was not necessarily so. The word we translate leprosy referred to many, many kinds of skin diseases. And oftentimes you could recover from these skin diseases or get well or get better, and then you would be readmitted to the community and to the life of faith. That was not at all uncommon. So when we read these restrictions on leprosy, don't think of Hansen's disease as we think of leprosy today, but think of skin diseases of all sorts that might bar you from participation in the community. But once you were cleansed of them, once you were healed, which would often happen, then you would be readmitted to the community. So the focus here is on ritual purity or ceremonial cleanliness, which once was achieved, then you could re-enter the community of God's people. Hope you join us tomorrow as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Leviticus.